Hi. Um, I thought I would try this new thing on YouTube. Instead of recording a video and downloading it to my computer, I would just go live with my reading and see how this goes. So here we go. I obviously will not be able to stop and chat until after we finish. So here we go, chapter 20 of The Song. It's strange that Spartacus forgot to tell his brothers in rebellion that they would all be crucified. When there are too many crosses, there are none. A drop of blood is ghastly, a sea of blood accepted. We weep above a single dying beast, but whistle past a slaughterhouse. You are my aid, said Sargon to the builder. You must be the one to see the mandate is carried out. But why? Asked Praxis. Because the children should be cared for in a special way before their parents die in the great stadium. It hardly seems humane to throw them to the beasts. They are so young. Oh, come now, the builder then enjoined with mock compassion. Since when have you become concerned about the welfare of children? There is a fear that if the beasts in the arena seize and devour a small child, they may not even lunge at those adults we wish destroyed. But what of mercy? Do we simply tear them from their mother's arms? If they will not give them up in peace, said Sargon. Peace? Peace. No, I cannot do it. You will do it, Sargon shouted in growing rage. I finished up your unicorn in a night. You promised me your soul. Have you forgotten, sculptor? I own you now. But the children, he protested, somewhat weaker than before. The little children. They are the slime and filth of Lower Urbis. They do not trust in unicorns or mountain gods. All such atheists must die. But you do not believe in unicorns or gods, and yet you live, said Praxis. Nor you, builder, but your unbelief will make the job I give you easier. Look at it this way. If there really are no gods, there's no morality or crime. And without gods, what difference does it make? The children you slay are a small function of flesh, tiny claw and organ, a passing movement in the sea of time. They are machines which eat the general welfare. In slaying them, therefore, you are a saint who stops their pointless eating of the common good. Yes, Praxis, drag them from their mothers and do not spare them for their screams. Here are your orders for the prison wardens. Praxis was ripped by shame and burned in furious hatred towards Sargon, but he took the scroll and left. The children would be placed in the chambers of a cave and poisoned in the fumes of root moss. Praxis trudged the heavy furlongs to the prison yards in agony of soul, a soul that he no longer owned. He had decried all serious belief. Now he had grave doubts about his doubts. Once in the prison, he read the orders from the scroll and shouted to the crowds that huddled in the cells. Every child of less than 7 summers must be yielded up. You have the promise of the state that they will die most mercifully in the caverns of Carnos. A flood of agony swept through the cells. There were no tears, just stunning disbelief. Shock tore the tongue of desperation from the hour of doom. Mothers drew their little ones tightly to themselves and stared wide-eyed at the gratings of their cells. Simply pass your children out to the doors. Every door is opened, one door at a time. Don't try to escape, or you will die ahead of time, and your children will not die in mercy, but be clubbed before your eyes. Praxis hated his decree, and he hated Sarkon. But more than all, he hated Praxis. He wished the singer really were alive and would come and strike him dead and save him from this hour. The door to cell 1 was opened wide, and 2 small forms were laid outside, dead. There were red marks on their necks. They had been quickly strangled by their mothers. The muffled sound of weeping blasphemed the inner sanctum of the prison. The soul of Praxis was now gripped by high compassion that would fold an infant into gentle death before it laid a frightened child before such a lonely dying as the executioners of Urbis could supply. In cell 2, a mother without the strength to slay her son tried desperately to hold him tight until a knight pulled the frightened child away and bludgeoned his mother with a mailed glove. He slammed the door as she fell backward and screaming. The child beheld her mangled face with terror in his own. Something in the builder died. Praxis cried when cell 3 was opened. 3 of the children who were placed outside were strangled. 2 more reached in horror for the parents they would never see again. Before the 4th cell opened, a low and plaintive chorus had begun, and songs spilled into the courtyard, flooding every cranny in the prison with the chorus of their hymn of hope. He comes in power. Rejoice, the hour of Jubilee is near. All afternoon the work went on. Most children laid outside were dead. The dead were placed on one cart, the living in a cage with high iron sides. Their wailing played counterpoint to the singer's song of hope. The crying and the joy filtered through the souls of guardsmen, knights, and courtiers. The inmates would have loved to have the singer's meal, but they had no bread. So as they joined in singing once again the star, a radiance garnered light from torches and spread in brilliance through the cells. They sang in brighter light than any day. Chapter 21. We have heard that when the commandant presided at the execution of the first Jews, he faltered momentarily. A woman held up her infant to him, crying, "Please, take my baby." He turned as though to spare her son the rifle fire, and then he clicked his heels and turned away. The next 6 million souls were paperwork. Occasionally, he left the office with a headache, but only because he feared the gas was running low or the cattle cars were late. The unicorn was placed on a little elevation in the Stadium of Life in the day the games began. Hushed singing of the national hymn, the anthem of the unicorn opened the festivities. Singarians were given their last chance to surrender their atheism and salute the great stone horse. Few did. The events were divided into 3 separate games, each occupying about an hour. The first games were the honor games, in which white knights sought to defend their territory filled with atheists, while black knights tried to penetrate their lines and kill the rabble in the lime-chalked boundaries. The last white knight, with Singarians still alive, was then declared the winner. Singarians not killed the first day became the victims of the next. The second event was called the Truth Games. In games of truth, Knights of the Unicorn advanced on foot to Singerians and offered them a final chance to recant and confess the true reality of mountain gods. One or two of those who huddled there did indeed recant. The rest were clubbed. The knight with the greatest number of converts was declared the winner. The converts were not many, but whenever a Singerian kissed the unicorn, a great cheer rose from thousands in the stands. Such Singerians spared and loaded into carts and sold on auction blocks outside the stadium when the games were over for the day. The third event was called Life Games. In these contests, Singerians were given a short sword and the right to live until the morrow if they could kill the giant Tasman jackals. These beasts were set on them in pairs. Few survived. Sarkhan was pleased most with these games, which he himself invented for amusement. He was always in the stands, smiling over all the carnage of the games. The builder felt a strange revulsion as he was seated in the Stadium of Life. He refused to sing the anthem of the unicorn and thought his protest went unnoticed in the multitudes of those around him in the stands. The games continued. Sarkhan saw the builder leave the stands before the main event. Misery dwelt in the builder's heart, and he wandered as far away from the stadium as he could. He finally stumbled on an old grotto covered with vines and broken beams. He entered in beneath the shade of afternoon and sat down silently. He buried his head in his hands and tried to forget that he was real. His soul, as much as it existed, was under evil subjugation. He wished, like mountain gods, that he was not. After several minutes, he became aware of men's voices praying and singing. They were Singerians, but somehow quite familiar. Suddenly, he realized that every man and anthem were in the grotto, too. In a moment, the Singerians were aware of him whom they had met so long ago. Anthem spoke in both surprise and fear. "Peace, sculptor! Are we now under state arrest? We have heard, Praxis, that you delight in murdering helpless children." "It's a lie! Sarkhan owns me totally. I never would have done it but for my bargain. I traded him my soul for the statue. I wish I never had begun." "Builder, would you even now be free of such a bargain, if you could be free?" asked every man. "There's no hope. Earthmaker, if he is, must loathe my wretched soul, if I have one. Both Earthmaker and his singer are. And you may be unchained if you cry out your guilt. Accept the star song and the stigmon and join us in the singer's meal." In the distance, they could hear the muffled cheers of Upper Urbis as their brothers died. Hear the throng, they perish without hope, yet each believes the singer will return and rescue him from death. I envy them, even if he should never come. Dying for any god is far better than living without one. "Oh, Praxis, cry out hope and be unchained while there yet is hope," Anthem pleaded. But Praxis turned and walked away. He had been gone for just an hour when black knights came to the gateway of the grotto. Every man and anthem were arrested. Sarkhan, who had noticed Praxis leave the stands, had sent some knights to follow him. Thus the grotto was discovered. Sargon was delighted at the capture of the pair and told the poet king that the leaders of the Singerian revolt were at last clapped in irons. The public execution of every man was scheduled immediately. Anthem was placed in the cages for the games. But every man had been the special grudge of Sargon, since he had given up his science for the singer. He would die a special death. Chapter 22. The son of a hangman will play with ropes and dream of the day he will have a scaffold of his own to tend. But let him drink too deep of love, and he will only stoke the hemp and cry that he is man. Praxis trembled when Sargon told him he would be the executioner of honor. His job was to set the torch to the oiled faggots at the feet of every man. Plague and Singerians must be handled just alike, or they will spread, said Sargon. When he is bound upon the wood, you only have to take the torch and plunge it at his feet. Just think, dear Praxis, you are the doctor of the sick mentality that eats like cancer on the great traditions of our state. I cannot do it, cried Praxis. We have a bargain. I own the soul you don't believe you have, said Sargon. And you will burn the faithless flesh of every man, and the unicorn will guard your way. There is no unicorn, groaned Praxis. But they had been through all that before. He suffered guilt until the evening of the execution came. The knights of Urbis delivered every man and laid him on the wood. The rough sticks cut into his abdomen and shoulders. A priest of Temple 23 put the oil of mercy on his shoulders to make his dying easier. Then, in the custom of his faith, he spat into the face of every man and spoke the liturgy of heresy. He rang 3 silver bells and walked away. A priest of Temple 17 led the crowd of citizens in singing the anthem of the unicorn. When the singing had subsided, Praxis took the torch and advanced to the naked unbeliever. As every man in Praxis faced each other, it was clear which one of them was desperate. Please believe in unicorns, the builder begged the youthful scholar. Believe and I'll not have to touch this wood with fire. Believe in just a few of the gods. Kiss the unicorn and live. Think of me, every man. I cannot live beneath the awful crime you forced me to commit. Come, know the singer's love and be unchained, said every man in peace. Yes, come and die with me, and you will know a life that fire can never touch. You don't belong to Sargon. Cry out to the singer, and you will be unchained. Tears glistened in the eyes of Praxis. He hesitated, and then, instead of touching the wood with fire, he hurled the torch at Sargon and fled into the thickening gloom of dusk. The speed with which he acted so surprised the guards that they permitted him to leave. Besides, they had no formal warrant to arrest the master builder of the state. By the time that Sargon picked up the torch and struck the flame, Praxis had disappeared. Every man stretched himself upon the burning wood and died. Praxis knew Sargon would waste no time in finding him. He ran until his breath gave out, and then he rested underneath a crannied arch. In tortured desperation, he looked up to the evening sky. Father of the singer, he implored, if you are there, I cry in guilt of blood and death. In your great heart, Can there be love enough to wash from me the highest crimes of terror? I am a wretched, evil man, he sobbed in violent convulsions. Oh, Father Spirit, if you are, lay me on the wood. Let every man go free. Every man is free, said a voice behind him. He cringed to see it was a white knight. Are you here for my arrest? Asked Practice. No, I am a Singerian myself. I too will shortly be arrested. And since I serve in the king's guard, I will be shot by archers. But every man is free. Sarkhan only took from him the life no man can keep. To give him one, no man can lose. I hunger for the meaning of your words. I too will die, but only for disobeying Sarkhan. I saw you throw the torch and followed you. Sarkhan picked up the fire and set it on the pile of wood, and every man himself became a torch to light the way to the courts of the father of the singer. Sarkhan is afraid. Each time a Singerian dies in the stadium of life, 2 more leave the stands. Sarkhan fights a futile battle, and he knows it. Even now, more than 30 knights in the guard of Urbis believe. Don't you mean disbelieve? Atheism is the charge for which they die. No, Singerians are true believers. Don't you see that when they die, there is no emptiness of soul? Only they are free who die in joy. Tell me, knight, would the singer ever ask that children die in caves? The knight, seeing the burden of Praxis' guilt, asked, Have you heard the star song yet? Once, when coming to this city, I listened while every man sang its majesty of hope. Then it seemed a pagan hymn. Now I do not know. His voice trailed off again. I remember just a few lines. In a low voice, the knight began to sing the words Praxis first heard on the open sea. His melody fell upward into joy and climbed its way in spangled rhapsody. Earth-makers, infant stars adored his boy and blazed his name through every galaxy. Love, sang the spirit sun, and mountains came. More melody and life began to grow. A song of light and darkness fled in shame before a universe in embryo. The fullness and the quiet of majesty began to settle on them both. The invader came in heavy presence to the star-hung canopy of crumbled stone. Mysterious light came gusting through the ghetto. As the final strains of the song faded, Praxis cried out to be unchained, and the scales of his reluctance fell away. The awful burden of his crime was lifted, and the invader, powerful and whole, swirled light into the darkest fissures of his soul. Praxis felt the buoyant delirium of that great discovery that indeed he had a soul. Please, knight, grant to me the Sigmon, he pled. The knight picked up a bit of soil and traced the singer's sign upon the sculptor's face. He spoke the words of life so glorious to those who were unchained. Earthmaker, singer, and invader be the substance of infinity. He and the knight embraced and parted in the joy he knew was his forever. He stopped in the dark street, threw back his head, and laughed, a free man's laughter. He shouted to the stars that had absorbed invader's outer light, I love you, singer, prince of planets, troubadour of life. And then he paused and remembered he was still a part of Urbis and a servant of the poet king. Or was he? He turned toward the temples of the city and shouted fearlessly, Sarkon, wherever you are, your grasp of death is over. I am a Singarian. Yes, yes, he laughed and shouted. I, Praxis, am a Singarian. None had ever sung it quite so loudly in the streets of Upper Urbis. Chapter 23. Creativity can sometimes be a curse. Ask Dr. Frankenstein. In half an hour, Praxis approached his studio. 2 guards were waiting at the door. One thing was left to care for before he submitted to arrest, and then, of course, to death. As he had hoped, the back door was unguarded. He slipped the key into the lock and edged the door ajar. The great leather hinges held their peace and did not creak. Once in the studio, he felt his way from surface to surface until his fingers felt the head of his greatest hammer. He lifted it in silence from its place and stole away. The guards in front were unaware that he had come and gone. He hurried through the streets until he came upon the causeway to the Stadium of Life. The night patrols recognized him, but had not heard he was a public enemy. Thinking him the favored aide of the august public prosecutor and Urbis's royal sculptor, they let him pass. He wound his way to the ramps that led to the arena floor, and there, gilded in moonlight, stood the great statue that he had made in one long year of toil. He thought about the weeks it took to shape the unicorn's great lifted leg, then drew his hammer back and heaved it in an arc of power. The stone leg shattered into silver shards, ignited into sparks by the moonlight. He remembered how the great white flanks had yielded in the passing of the months to the urging of his chisel. Now, with brutality, he swung the hammer and a ton of stone came crashing down. As the body of the great horse fell, the head of Sarkon struck the paving and rolled free. Patrols rushed in when they heard the raucous clatter of the statue in disintegration. Praxis raised his hammer once again and brought it down on the severed head of Sarkon. The godlike jaw split. The heavy forehead shattered. Praxis was arrested in the marble wreckage of the unicorn. Even as the guards held the sculptor fast, he looked up at the empty stands. The veins of his neck stood out. He sang with fat power. And now the great reduction is begun. Earthmaker and troubadour are one. The stands of the great stadium were silent in the starlight. And this is our last chapter for this particular book in the trilogy, chapter 24. The day of one's death is a good day to be really alive. The sunlight was blinding as the life games began. Anthem and Praxis were the main event, and thus released to die at once. They issued under the guard from the darkened passageway that led from underneath the lower stands. The grate lifted and closed behind them. Blinking in the dazzling light, Anthem saw the grinning Sarkon in the royal box with the poet king himself. But Anthem had grown weary with the ancient struggle. His mind went back to the wall where first he met the world hater, now the gloating Sargon, public prosecutor. Not many years had gone, but his eyes had beheld all the human savagery that he could tolerate. The letting of his own blood he knew to be the grim necessity for opening the last grand gate of life. Anthem and Praxis advanced to the center of the ring and knelt. The grating on the west flew open and the giant Tasman jackals leaped into the sun. Urbis, in the passing of the years, became the lair of wolverines, and in the crawling centuries her temples crumbled. Terra waited for her final fate. In a day that none could know, the singer triumphed, and the mountain gods were all forgotten. But Sargon lived and changed his face and promises for every generation. And centuries ran down like wax into some lost abyss. Then time threw orbit wires around the planet Terra, and silver-suited men looked out through domes of glass. And in the center of the universe, the singer and his father spoke a final victory. The ancient world hater heard their whispered plans and trembled. The Prince of Dragons gazed through 1,000 fields of stars, and across the gleaming universe he saw the Prince of Planets and steeled himself for conflict. The light of the invader glinted from the singer's sword. A great galactic storm was gathering among the stars, and Terra lay directly in the wake. And that is the end of the song, which is the second book in the trilogy, the Singer Trilogy by Calvin Miller. Next time we will go into the final book, which is called The Finale. I'm so glad that you joined me here this evening, and I hope that this has worked as well as I hope it has. And until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and grant you his peace. Bye for now.